Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us for our Madison Matters Town Hall. I'm Nicole Williams. Over the past several days, we brought you a series of stories ahead of the city's special election tomorrow. Voters will decide which form of government is right for North Alabama's second largest city. Tonight, we want to hear from representatives on both sides of this issue. Meet James Ross with Madison Forward, a group that supports changing to a council manager form of government, and Catherine Pate with Don't Mess with Madison, the group that formed in opposition of the change. Before we hear from them, we're going to dive into how the city of Madison came to this point. Kathy, let's talk about why you feel like the structure is wrong for the city of Madison. Because as you've said before, you feel like, the people will no longer have, some people will no longer have a vote, or they won't have a vote for the executive, the person who runs the city.
That's correct.
Share more for us, please, about that.
Yeah, so we're redistricting. If this is approved, we're going to redistrict from 7 districts down to 6. So that's less representation. That's less representation. It's going to dilute the vote for the citizens in each district, and that's one of the reasons the NAACP doesn't support it. And I will back up. You were asking questions about the financial. So a more comparable city to Madison is Dothan. So Dothan has a slightly larger population than Madison does. They hired a city manager a couple of years ago, and his pay was $180,000 to $190,000.
Okay.
Within 6 months, he convinced the council or their commission to hire an assistant city manager. So, and that person's paid $150,000, plus they get a car allowance, plus they get moving expenses if they're moving from outside of the city, which the council has said they're going to choose somebody that is, they're going to do a nationwide search. That person's going to come into our community. They may not have the same values that people in Madison have. And we see Madison as a community, not a business. And so you may be able to get efficiencies, you may not. Somebody should do a cost-benefit analysis to actually determine that. But back to the previous question you asked, we would be diluting the vote of, diluting the voice of the citizens by redistricting from 7 down to 6 districts.
How do you respond to that, James?
Well, because of the 2020 census, we're going to be redistricting anyways. And if you look at the numbers, it's really not going to make that big a difference moving from 7 to 6. If you look at what's going on in Huntsville, their city council does just fine, and they've got about 12 times the amount of folks represented in their districts than we do in Madison. So we just don't feel like that is a significant issue.
Well, we know, let's talk about that. Since you mentioned Huntsville, all right, let's talk about that. We know 15 cities have city managers in our state. Not very many that are close to the size of Madison. But why don't we see this structure within cities, larger cities here in our state, like, say, places like Montgomery or Birmingham? Why don't we see this structure in places like that?
Yeah, I can't speak for, obviously, all the cities in Alabama, but I can tell you that, the ability to actually bring in a city manager was brought into law by the state like 16, 17 years ago. So this form of government was not even allowed until the Council Manager Act was approved by the state of Alabama. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Some people think that this is really all about consolidating power and control. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, over the past, let's say, 20 years in Madison, we've had numerous mayors. We've had circumstances where the mayors and the city council were not working very well collaboratively, and we've had great mayors. The beauty of the council manager form of government, it really ensures that you have collaboration, because they're almost forced to work together to make sure that their vision is implemented. And I really feel like that collaboration is what we need with a city that's growing as fast as Madison.
The big question here, most people want the answer to, is who will this benefit and who won't it benefit?
I'll go first.
Okay.
You know, I feel like all the citizens in Madison will benefit because it'll provide a ability to have professional leadership and ensure that services are delivered in the most professional way possible. I believe economically it could make a huge impact in a positive manner to the citizens. I believe our schools would benefit because they get transparency and they get consistency regardless of political leadership changes. And, you know, overall, I believe the benefits far outweigh any potential cons.
Well, some people say, why not hire a city administrator? We know the mayor's assistant right now is not authorized to do the type of responsibilities and roles that we're seeking. But why not hire a city manager, or why not consider a different form of government, say perhaps a strong mayor or something like that?
Yeah, I feel like it's accountability. You know, a city administrator generally is working for the mayor, and, you know, the city council working with the mayor, collectively providing that guidance to a city manager, providing that vision and direction. I think that is by far the most efficient way to run our city government.
I don't see I don't understand why the city administrator can't take more of a role in managing the city. He does whatever the mayor wants him to do, right? So the mayor defines what his job is. If you look at other cities like Hoover, they have a city administrator. Hoover is much more equitable to us maybe 30 years ago when they created their school system and they started growing very rapidly. As far as who benefits, I don't see a lot of benefit. I've lived in a city in South Carolina where South Carolina is more popular to have a city manager. And what I saw as a resident was a lot of finger pointing, where you would go to the council and you would have raised concerns and then they would blame the city manager. Or if somebody went to the city manager, they blame the council. And so you can have a lot of finger pointing going on. And that's what happens in Anniston. Anniston has gone through at least 4 city managers in the past 10 or 12 years. You know, so it's not a panacea. Right now, our school system is mostly autonomous. The schools, we've been building schools for the past 10 years. We've built a high school, an elementary school, and a middle school's about to open, and they've already announced a new elementary school for Limestone County. So I see that we just don't know. You know, we just don't know. And I think that Madison is doing well. We're probably growing a little bit faster than I would like, but you know, and that creates a lot of problems with traffic. But if you look at another city that was discussed last year, was Auburn. Auburn was the big city that we kept talking about as far as a great example of a city manager. But if you look at their last election and what the concerns of the citizens were from the council people's perspective, it was traffic, infrastructure, affordable housing. It was a lot of the same problems that we have today, and they've had a city manager for 30 years. So that's my perspective.
We know when cities go through this process, right, once they select a city manager, sometimes the city manager works out, sometimes they don't. But we know under this form, if it is passed, the council would have the power to do something about that. Would you like to share more about that, James?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the mayor and the city council take a vote, a majority vote can remove a city manager immediately, and that's all it takes.
Do you think that's enough? Do you think that, you know, is enough power for council if there are problems with the city manager, if this goes through, that they at least can remove that person and consider someone else?
Well, so that gets back to it's up to the council. It's not up to the voters, it's up to the council. And granted, the voters choose who the council is, but we don't know what kind of contracts there's going to be. The council can't really tell us. They can't tell us anything. It's almost like you have to pass the bill before we know what's in it. So we don't know if he's going to have a contract, if that contract's going to have a buyout clause, or what.
Historically, the buyout clauses are literally 2 to 3 months of salary. It's not like an SEC football coach where you're on the hook for millions of dollars. And if I could, I'd like to mention schools. Kathy mentioned the schools. You know, everybody in Madison is extremely proud of our school district, and we have one of the top school systems not only in the state but in the country. We elect our superintendent in the exact same manner we're proposing we would bring in a city manager. And it's worked out pretty well, and there's always uncertainties, and you've got to get the right individual. But when you get it right, the benefits are right there in front of us.
In the process of putting this series together, we've learned that cities do sometimes encounter issues and problems with their city manager not being effective. We learned that sometimes a city decides one way and later changes course because of these kinds of issues, right? This report that we have from the Alabama City County Management Association that we want to show you shows a list of cities that operated under a council manager and later ditched it. Flip-flopping isn't common in our state, but it does happen elsewhere.
The city of Richmond, Virginia, right now, it was a council manager form of government. About 20 years ago, it changed to a strong mayor form of government.
Political experts say sometimes changing the way a city operates happens because of a power struggle.
Especially when you start talking about budgets and finances and things, some of those decisions do get really hard politically because it's going to create some winners and losers. But ultimately, the city as a whole has to be put first.
And as you've heard, the decision to change forms of government is not taken lightly by local leaders and requires months, if not years, of research before deciding to take the next step. We spoke to an expert who broke down best practices for us and when it comes to making this major change.
Voters in Madison are getting ready to weigh in on a plan to shake up city government. And as James Brooks with the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C. explains, a shift like this demands laser-sharp vision when it comes to future growth and development.
There must be a set of expectations amongst the population or amongst the current elected leadership about what they will get out of this in the end.
One key to success, City Council's role in carving out a roadmap to keep Madison on track.
The best practice is that they are the visionaries for the city. They are the approvers of decisions that the city manager puts forward.
He says council members must embrace their role as overseers
to help ensure that whatever is being implemented by the manager is done well and done correctly,
without overstepping and interfering in day-to-day management of the city.
That's a very hard thing for council members to do when they have been more directly engaged when you've had executive departments. So planning for having a city manager who you've hired and then who you have to leave alone to do the work you've hired them to do and to let them do their job is, I think, always an exercise of restraint on the part of the elected leaders who, oftentimes want to get down to the details, but that's not their job. The details, the details belong to the city manager.
The search to find a manager who can handle the details of Madison and the $70+ million it takes to provide everything from police to public works to parks is critical. Stuart Welch III, mayor of the city of Mountain Brook, says hiring a city manager equipped with two things set Mountain Brook up for success.
What they want to do is make sure that there is continuity in management.
A strong commitment to an open line of communication with the people whose lives their decisions impact the most also pays off.
The integral connection point to the citizenry to explain why policies are being carried out and in what manner, and why the money is being spent in the way that it is.
At the end of the day, experts say one form of government doesn't fit all.
There is no better or worse. There is no good or bad. There is only one form or the other based on the needs, expectations, hopes, and aspirations of the community.
Polls for tomorrow's special election open in less than 12 hours. Let's take a look now at the ballot and what voters will see when they make their voices heard.
On May 9th, people in the city of Madison will make a very important decision. They'll choose to keep the current form of government, which allows the mayor to handle the city's major operations, or shift that role to a city manager.
I think both options have merit.
On your ballot, you'll see these words, and you'll simply vote yes or no. Some people made up their minds by stopping by forums across the city to learn more about the plan.
I'm leaning toward a yes. In fact, I'm a very definite yes. When I look at city government, it seems to me that you're better served by having somebody who has some experience, somebody who had an education.
Others proudly displaying their decision on signs on their lawns.
The reason I am for council mayor to remain is that I want to elect the person that runs our city departments, and I do not want to lose a district.
But will people vote at all?
We now have residents who care.
The numbers suggest otherwise.
Or the names that they needed on that petition was 10% of those who voted in the past municipal election. The number that they needed was 896, which indicates that approximately 8,960 voters voted in the last municipal election. What I think is telling is that Madison has 57,000 residents.
The mayor says people should take time to weigh in on this.
We're all trying to see what's best for Madison. A majority will win.
Voter apathy is a concern as we anticipate this vote tomorrow. Before we go, we want to give both of you an opportunity to weigh in and just, share what you'd like to leave people with before they make this big decision tomorrow.
I would just say you had mentioned some other cities, and why is this not in other cities? In 2018, this similar election came up in Fairhope, which is a very similar size to Madison, and the voters there defeated it. So I would just encourage people, we've heard a lot of people don't know where they're supposed to vote because it's a municipal election. It's not your typical voting place. You can go to the Secretary of State site. I believe it's Alabama Votes, and enter your name and your birthday, and it'll tell you where you need to vote.
James?
Yeah, well, we've been looking at this issue since 2015, so we're very excited that tomorrow's the big day. And I just want to highly encourage the voters of Madison to get out and make their voice heard as we decide the future of Madison. And thanks for hosting.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. We want to make sure people are as informed as they can be as they get ready to decide on this, because it's a big deal. It would change, the city in a big way in terms of how it operates. And so we don't take this lightly, and we hope people will get out there and weigh in on this. How are you, sensing the turnout might be in terms of what you're seeing and hearing out there in the community? You all have been across the city. You've done several forums on this, trying to keep people informed and make sure they have all the information they need to make this decision. What are you sensing?
Based on social media presence, I feel like there's a lot of interest, but it's a busy time of year for a lot of folks. So we're hoping for a great turnout, and vote yes.
We're hoping for a great turnout too. Vote no. Thank you for having us, giving us the opportunity to speak about the election.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. We'll leave it there, folks. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you take a little time tomorrow and make your voice heard.